Want to welcome you guys back to another episode of Pistons Talk Podcast presented by FanDuel. We have a jam-packed episode for you guys today. We'll be talking about the NBA power rankings. Where were the Detroit Pistons ranked? Why should you guys be excited about this? We'll also be getting into the 2026 Rising Stars game. Ron Holland was not invited for the second consecutive year. He did has some thoughts about it, and I took a little bit of time to illustrate a graphic of all the rising stars to see if Ron Holland was actually snubbed from this game. We'll also be getting into some news that did come out today as it does relate to Jenkins and him getting converted to a standard contract. What did the Detroit Pistons offer him? JB Bickerstaff made some comments about going for it. Last night before the Pistons Warriors game pregame, it was asked about dynasties. I think what he said, we could kind of add it to this upcoming NBA trading deadline in going for it. Could the Pistons go for it? As does relate to going for it, Mark Stein reported that the Pistons are considering to trade for Miles Bridges or Michael Porter Jr. That's interesting. We'll also get into the Milwaukee Bucks. As you guys know, they are looking to trade Giannis. We got a mock trade proposal from FanDuel this week. We're going to be going over that and kind of giving our honest thoughts and reactions with this mock trade for Giannis to the Pistons. I give my top 5 trade exception targets for the Pistons and give my opinion of what I think the Pistons will do with their trade exception. And then we'll forecast the games of the week. Let's get into today's episode. I've been talking for 2 minutes about what we're actually going to talk about. But man, like there's just so much things that I do kind of want to go over with you guys. So let's start with the power rankings. So this week, the Detroit Pistons were ranked the number 1 team across the NBA with the power rankings. This is actually really cool if you're a Piston fan. One, because the Pistons have not been actually ranked number 1 in the power rankings at all. But I will read it for the audio listeners if they didn't see it this week. So the Pistons were ranked number 1. The Thunder were number 2. The Rockets number 3. Spurs number 4. Nuggets number 5. Suns number 6. Timberwolves 7. Celtics 8. Knicks 9 and Cavs 10. But I thought it was really cool to see that the Detroit Pistons are finally getting their respect. They're a 35-win basketball club right now. Them and OKC are the only 2 NBA teams that have 35-plus wins this season, which I think is really cool. If you would have told me that the Detroit Pistons were going to be the number 1 seed in the East, you would have told me that they were going to be named number 1 in power rankings at the end of January, I probably would have laughed. But if this goes to show you the type of job that JB Bickerstaff and the Detroit Pistons coaching staff has done to put them in position, one, to not only, be named number 1 in the power rankings this past week, but number 2, you've had the number 1 seed for a couple of months, and you have a 5.5 game lead right now on the New York Knicks. The Knicks and the Celtics right now are battling for the number 2 seed. And then you look at the Raptors and the Cavs. I mean, the Eastern Conference in the top 4 is just a dogfight right now. Let 2 through 4 kind of fight it out, and the Pistons have a very good opportunity to pile onto that, especially as they play the Brooklyn Nets this Sunday, which should be a good matinee game. Isaiah Stewart bobblehead night, by the way. I don't know if you guys seen the bobblehead. It's actually a pretty cool bobblehead. Has Isaiah Stewart on a tractor. You guys know Isaiah Stewart does a lot of farming in the offseason. Probably the coolest collab I've seen with the bobblehead in quite some time. But no, I'm rambling a little bit. Just to kind of circle back to the power rankings, really cool. I'll be interested to see if the Pistons can hold on to that number 1 spot going into next week. Obviously, the loss this week to the Phoenix Suns probably won't do them any favors, but you have a good opportunity to finish off the week 3-1 if you do take care of business against the Brooklyn Nets tomorrow in Detroit. So let's get into the Rising Stars. Now, this is a competition where rookies and sophomores get to compete against each other in kind of like a pre-All-Star game festivities. It's one of the games that I do particularly watch during All-Star weekend because ironically, they play harder than the actual All-Stars on Sunday, but Ron Holland caught up with Cody Davis, and this is a quote from Cody Davis's article, of Ron learning that he won't be competing. It says, quote, "I did not get invited. Now I'm just going to go out there and prove why I should have been out there." So that's back-to-back years that Ron Holland was not invited to a Rising Stars game. As you guys know, Ron Holland was a top 5 pick, Trajan's first draft pick, believe it or not, and he wasn't invited. Now, I went ahead and I kind of illustrated all the players that were invited to this Rising Stars game. So I'm going to put it on the screen for you guys that are watching live on YouTube. For an audio listener, I'm just going to be going over and reading the stats for all of these sophomores that made the Rising Stars game and kind of compare it to Ron Holland's stats. So before we kind of get into the Rising Stars, I'm going to read Ron Holland's stats before we start. So Ron Holland this season for the Pistons is putting up 8.4 points a game, grabbing 4.3 rebounds and 1.4 assists coming off the bench for the Detroit Pistons. So the Rising Stars roster consists of Matas Pizelis, AJ Mitchell, Jalen Tyson, Stephon Castle, Alex Sarr, Khalil Ware, Donovan Clingan, Reed Shepard, Jalen Wells, Kashawn George, and Cam Spencer. Let's start with Matas Pizelis, Ron Holland's old teammate in the G League Ignite for the Chicago Bulls. Almost putting up 15 points a game, 14.9 to be exact, 5.3 rebounds, and 2 assists a game. I don't really think I have any arguments about Matas Pizelis making the Rising Stars roster. I don't think either of you or any of you guys watching right now probably would disagree with that either. The next player is Stephon Castle. 16.6 points a game, 5 rebounds, 7 assists. Again, I don't really have any arguments with Stephon Castle making the Rising Stars game whatsoever. He's actually one of San Antonio's better players. When you're just talking about the young core in San Antonio with Victor Wembanyama and Stephon Castle and others, Dylan Harper, obviously, but Stephon Castle is a really good player. Donovan Clingan, one of the bigs that did make it, he's putting up a double-double, averaging 11.3 points a game and 11.2 rebounds and 1.9 assists. I don't really have any issues with Donovan Clingan making it. Kashawn George, who is a combo guard for the Washington Wizards, he's putting up 15.6 points a game, 5.9 rebounds, 5.1 assists. If you guys remember with my 29 trade targets podcast that we did earlier this month, he was actually one of the players that, like, if I were the Pistons, I would definitely call to see what it would take to get him. Probably a lot, honestly, because he's a really good player, really good, two guard, can play some point guard in certain situations. But again, I don't really have any issues with him making the Rising Stars game. AJ Mitchell, second round pick by the Oklahoma City Thunder. He's putting up 14.1 points a game, 3.5 rebounds, 3.7 assists. I did read he is kind of dealing with an injury. I don't know if he's going to be 100% healthy or even participate in this Rising Star game. But again, I don't really have issues with him making this roster. He's played incredible this season. I have had an opportunity to catch a couple Oklahoma City Thunder games that I've watched on Peacock and I've watched on Amazon Prime and ESPN. AJ Mitchell is a really, really good player. Great find by OKC. But again, I don't really have an issue with him making the team. The other big is Alex Sarr. He's actually leading this whole team in points a game, almost putting up 18, 17.7 to be exact, 7.5 rebounds, 2.8 assists. Again, I don't really have an issue with Alex Sarr making this team. Second overall pick. Now, Reed Shepard and Cam Spencer, in my opinion, are the two snipers in this. Reed is putting up 12.8 points a game, 2.6 rebounds, 3 assists. Obviously, getting an extended role with Fred VanVleet out. Again, really don't have an issue with him making the roster. Cam Spencer, much like Reed Shepard, 3-point specialist, 11.7 points a game, 2.7 rebounds, 5.7 assists. I think where they had a decision to make with Ron is you look at Jalen Tyson and you look at Jalen Wells. So Jalen Tyson for the Cavs is putting up 13.8 a game, 5.6 rebounds, and 2.3 assists. And then Jalen Wells is putting up 11.7 points a game, 3.5 rebounds, and 1.6 assists a game. I think when they were looking to fill out this roster, they were looking at kind of like those forwards. And obviously, Ryan comes off the bench, doesn't get as much opportunities as like a Jalen Tyson currently is because the Cavs are dealing with their injuries. And Jalen Wells is one of the Memphis Grizzlies' best defenders, and he gets plenty of opportunities. And then Khalil Ware is the other big with Alex Sarr and Donovan Clingan that did make the roster. He's putting up 11.5 points a game, 9.6 rebounds, and a half assist a game. I think it just really came down to when you're looking at this Rising Stars roster, it's like Jalen Tyson, Jalen Wells, and AJ Mitchell. Like those are the three forwards that they were looking at. And in terms, if you're just looking at points per game, Ron Holland actually has the lowest point per game total. I do think he should have got invited. Maybe it's a little bit of Pistons bias leaking out a little bit, but I guess whoever does make these and invite these players out, I think they're mostly looking at one, how much do you play, impact, and I guess points per game and stats. Oops, my mic fell over. Sorry about that, you guys. I guess points per game does kind of factor into it. I really like what we have in Ron Holland. I really like just the player that he is, the glue guy, the energy guy off the bench. Don't want him to feel too bad about not making the Rising Stars game. Don't really think that's that big of a deal. I can understand him wanting to, play with his peers, but he's the type of guy that strikes me that is going to have his chip on his shoulder. Anytime he sees one of these guys, I think he's going to try to bust their ass. He's going to try to go at them because that's just who Ron is, and we love that. We love the energy. We love, the occasional little scraps. I think the last scrap he had, which I think it was like his first one, and you couldn't even call it a scrap. Keon Ellis flopped. Ron just pushed him, and Keon just like dove and like flopped. Like Ron actually touched him and pushed him hard. He barely touched him, but that flop still lives in my head rent free because he acted like he was dead after. But kind of circling back to the Rising Stars and Ron, like honestly, just to kind of end this topic and end this segment, Ron can get some rest, relaxation, get his body and mind right for the remainder games because we're already at the halfway point of this season. So maybe he can get, a couple days off, get his body right, any nagging injuries that are bothering him, and he can get right for the remainder of this NBA regular season schedule. Now, the next segment we're going to get into is presented by FanDuel. So right now on FanDuel, you guys, if you look at most regular season wins, the Oklahoma City Thunder obviously are the odds-on favorite at minus 1,100. But look who's number two. The Detroit Pistons, plus 650. Followed by the San Antonio Spurs at plus 2,500. Denver Nuggets at plus 4,000. Houston Rockets at plus 4,500. Boston Celtics at plus 8,000. The New York Knicks at plus 20,000. And if you would have told me this summer that the Detroit Pistons would be on a 60-win pace, I would have been like, man, you are crazy. Like, who did we trade for? But it's so cool to see just all the success that this team is having. It's awesome to cover as a content creator and a host of a podcast with you guys. I mean, we did a post-game podcast last night at 2 a.m. after a win over Golden State. Those West Coast trips are a bitch, by the way, especially staying out. But I love the grind. I think a goal I have this year is to do a post-game show for all 82 regular season games and obviously the playoffs for sure. Still kind of contemplating if I want to do live streams during the playoffs as the games are happening kind of maybe like watch parties. Don't know if I'm going to do that. Maybe I will. Maybe I won't. I don't know. You guys can let me know if you would watch something like that. Or if you're an audio listener, if you'd be interested in just like a watch party type of thing. But I want to kind of get into our next segment. We're just going to take a quick break. And then after we come back from this quick break, we're going to be discussing Danish Jenkins and a contract that he was actually offered by the Detroit Pistons. This news came out today from Mark Stein, but we'll be right back, you guys. Okay, you guys, we're back. We're going to get into Danish Jenkins. Now, as you guys know, he has 3 games remaining on his two-way contract. Two-way players are allowed to be active for 50 games, so he's been active for 47 games. His two-way will actually expire, ironically, on February 5th against the Washington Wizards. So, um, we got a report earlier this morning from Jake Fisher and Mark Stein on their Substack, and I'll be sharing an article that was published by the Real GM Wiretap. Now, the reason why I'm sharing it is because Mark Stein and Jake Fisher have a paid Substack. I'm sorry, I'm not giving you 12 bucks a month. I'm just not. Not it's not that I don't have the 12 bucks. I'm just not like giving you 12 bucks for um articles that a lot of people just honestly just publicize for free anyways because they pay the 12 bucks and they kind of not all heroes wear capes. So shout out the Real GM. But the article reads, Danish Jenkins turned down a 2-year minimum contract from the Pistons. Goes on to say Detroit Pistons guard Danish Jenkins turned down a contract that would have run for the remainder of this season and converted next season. Jenkins has been a regular rotation player for the Pistons while on a two-way contract. The article also goes on to say that if Jenkins exhausts that eligibility, he'll be unable to be active in NBA games for Detroit for the remainder of the regular season. In addition, two-way players aren't eligible to play in the postseason. The Pistons have the ability to convert Jenkins to a rest of the season contract, which would make the guard eligible to play for in remaining games as well as postseason. Jenkins would then be a restricted free agent this offseason. Detroit also has their 5.1 biannual exception, which they could use to offer Jenkins more money. However, using a biannual exception this season means it would not be able to be used next season. Now, before we kind of get into the Danish Jenkins rejecting a contract from the Pistons, I do want to say this. Keith Smith, who's someone that I respect so much. If you guys don't follow Keith Smith, you definitely should during trading deadline because he tries to stay on top of it. He has a really good podcast too, called The Front Office Show. But he kind of outlines why this is smart for Danish Jenkins and his representation. It says locking into a 2-year deal now gives the Pistons all the control. This summer, Jenkins would be a restricted free agent, and Detroit would have his early bird rights. That should earn him more than a minimum for next season. He'll probably stay in Detroit on the minimum, but more likely for the rest of this season than a 2-year deal than a contract for this summer. So basically, what the Pistons are probably going to do, you guys, is they're just going to offer him a contract for the remainder of this season from February 6th until the playoffs end, right? And then they have a decision to make with him. How much are they going to offer him in restricted free agency? I thought they were going to be able to get like a 2-year veterans minimum deal, but obviously his representation wants him to make a little bit more money, and I understand that. Like, you want the most for your clients, and obviously like a 2-year vet minimum obviously isn't what they're really looking for, and I can understand that. I don't really know what they're going to offer him. I don't know if the Pistons are actually going to use their biannual exception. Real GM did mention. Don't really know what a contract for him is going to look like this summer. It'll be interesting to see what the reports are with that, but did kind of want to touch on the Danish Jenkins news that did come out from Mark Stein and Jake Fisher. We're also going to get into more of their reporting as does relate to Michael Porter Jr. and Miles Bridges. So shout out to Koo because I know he does pay for the Substack. And his tweet says, according to Mark Stein's latest article this morning, the Pistons are internally considering making a trade for Michael Porter Jr. or Miles Bridges. So that's interesting. That's very interesting to me because I think why it's interesting is when you kind of just look at the Detroit Pistons right now. If you guys are watching live, you're probably seeing me struggling with my lower thirds because they're all out of whack because I didn't organize them. But we've talked about Michael Porter Jr. so much on our post game podcast, on our weekend podcast. When you just kind of look at the season he's having and what he's doing with the Brooklyn Nets, I think it does make a lot of sense from a basketball perspective of looking at a guy like him and just what he's doing, being able to score at all three levels. His volume has gone up significantly, but his efficiency hasn't gone down. If you kind of like look at it from his year in Denver, his last year in Denver to his year in Brooklyn, it's about the same. I don't think he's getting 20, 25 shots a night in Detroit. I just don't. I do think, though, you could play him at power forward, next to Jalen Duren. He could be a guy that could easily be a secondary option. We always talk about getting Cade Cunningham a secondary option. I mean, could Michael Porter Jr. be that secondary option? Now, I did see Brian Windhorst yesterday say that he hasn't heard that Brooklyn is taking calls of possibly dealing Michael Porter Jr. I think as we do get closer to this deadline, I think everyone is available for the right price. I don't think anyone saw Luka Doncic getting traded. I think the Nets know where they're at as an organization. They're currently rebuilding. Michael Porter Jr. is their best asset. They could easily get the 2 first-round picks that has been reported that they would be seeking to possibly deal him. Obviously, salary filler to kind of match a Michael Porter Jr. contract, and maybe you throw in a young player on this team. I think it just really depends, like where the Pistons are at and like how far they really want to go with this team as we kind of get closer to the playoffs and who we're going to be playing in the first round, possibly getting out of the first round, getting into the second round. Like, are you going to see the Knicks? Are you going to see Boston? Are you going to see the Magic? Are you going to see the Cavs, who've been playing better as of late? So I think a guy like Michael Porter Jr. does kind of make some sense for the Detroit Pistons. And the Miles Bridges name, I'll just touch on this for a couple of minutes. I feel like there's someone in the organization that really likes Miles Bridges. And it's not me like shitting on him like whatsoever, but like even before Trajan got here, you guys remember like the Pistons were internally interested in like Pascal Siakam while he was in Toronto. They were interested in Tobias Harris when he was still in Philly. They were interested in Miles Bridges, OG Anunoby when he was still in Toronto. Like obviously the front office and the organization was looking for a forward that could hit threes and could defend a little bit. The Miles Bridges name has been a name that has been kind of floated out there for a while. I really don't know who it is in the organization. They have to be a Michigan State alum. That's all I'm going to say. They have to be a Michigan State alum because just talking about him in 2026, I feel like I've been talking about him since 22, honestly. But just the player that he is, obviously, we know he can put the ball on the floor. He can shoot threes. He can be a lob threat. Obviously, him and LaMelo have like really good chemistry. I just kind of wonder, though, considering what Charlotte is doing right now, are they really willing to sell off on him? Because To start the season, Charlotte was really bad. They were one of the worst teams in the Eastern Conference. But as of late, they've been playing really good basketball. They played excellent basketball in the month of January, and they're knocking at the door right now with the play-in tournament. I mean, they're right on the Chicago Bulls' ass. Like, I think they're only 2 or 3 games out of that 10 seed. If the Pistons could possibly see the Hornets in the first round, wouldn't that be something? That would be just fun for all the wrong reasons. If you guys know Sean, who we had in the podcast last week, he's like resident number one hater of Charlotte Hornets with their fans. They do not like Sean with the LaMelo and Cade discourse and the conversations. But that would be a really fun first round matchup. But kind of circling back to Miles Bridges, I just find it really hard to believe that Charlotte would want to sell off on him. But I guess if the offer is right, if Trajan and the Pistons have kind of just circled it down to Michael Porter Jr. or Miles Bridges of considering to make a move for those two players, if I had to take my pick, I'm probably going Michael Porter Jr. I really am. I think he's shown the ability to play in a championship caliber team when he won a championship in Denver with Nikola Jokic and those guys over there. He's shown the ability to kind of, be a third option. He's shown the ability to hit 3-point shots at a pretty decent clip. He could be a number 2 option in the starting lineup with Cade Cunningham and Jalen Duren. Like, could you imagine having, 25 from Cade, 17 to 18 from Duren, and maybe you get like a cool, like, I don't know, let's just say like 15 to 20 from Michael Porter Jr. That would be pretty exciting. Like, does this organization feel like if you add a MPJ or a Miles Bridges, we'll say, are you good enough to make it out of the East and possibly make it to the NBA Finals this year in a Eastern Conference that doesn't have Jason Tatum this year, who basically said, I'm not coming back this year. Tyrese Halliburton is still hurt. I mean, you have a window to possibly make it to the finals and win a championship. Like, is Michael Porter Jr. or Miles Bridges one of those players? The organization is obviously weighing out all their options of players that could be available, but sounds like what Mark Stein has heard from talking to the Detroit Pistons that they're really looking at both of those players in terms of upgrading their roster. Want to get into our next segment. Now, I did kind of touch on JB Bickerstaff. Now, he was talking to the media yesterday before a game, and I'm going to read a quote because unfortunately I cannot play the video that I did clip because I know YouTube will just like mark it for copyright, unfortunately, and I don't want to get in trouble with YouTube, but give me a couple of seconds just to scroll and read the quote and give you guys context to this quote from JB Bickerstaff. So he was asked about NBA dynasties, and this was his quote. He says, quote, you look over the past 5 or 6 years, and there's been a new champion every year. I think that's great for the league because it puts pressure on teams to go for it because the opportunity is there. Now, we were just talking about Michael Porter Jr. and we're talking about Miles Bridges. JB Bickerstaff said, like, if there's an opportunity to go for it and you're doing well, and I would assume that the Pistons feel like they're doing well. They're number 1 in the East, have a 5.5 game lead right now in the Eastern Conference. Like, do they feel that the time is now to make a big move? The time is now to maximize this window in the East. Like we mentioned, no Jason Tatum, no Tyrese Halliburton. You've shown the ability to beat Boston. You've shown the ability to beat the Knicks. You beat them in the playoffs without Isaiah Stewart and Jaden Ivey last year. So maybe the opportunity is there for this team to make a big move, make a big splash. I just found it very interesting considering the time of year, like January 31st as we're recording this podcast. He said that on the 30th. It's really interesting to say right before the trade deadline. I mean, you guys could read the tea leaves, you guys could speculate, but like he could have just given just a cut dry answer about dynasties. Like, yeah, like, want to keep them together and go for it. But like just the way it was worded and the way that he said it, um, I want you guys to go over to my Twitter and listen to that video. Obviously, I can't play the video because of copyright restrictions, but um, really interesting that he had that quote when talking with FanDuel and the Detroit Pistons media members before the Warriors game, talking about it puts pressure on teams to go for it because the opportunity is there to, put a winning product on the floor. And when you have a window, you got to take advantage of that window. But I don't know, man. I'm really curious to see what the Detroit Pistons do, at this deadline in terms of upgrading the 3-point shooting, upgrading, um, you know, more of like secondary ball handling, and whatever upgrades Trajan in the front office feel that this team does ultimately need. Now, the last couple segments of the podcast, we're gonna get into Giannis. So I'm sure you guys saw Shams Charania's tweet this week. We'll put it on the screen. It says two-time MVP Giannis Antetokounmpo is ready for a new home at the February 5th NBA trade deadline or in the offseason as several rival teams make aggressive offers to the Milwaukee Bucks for him, and the franchise is starting to listen, league sources tell ESPN. Now, I think we do know that just the Giannis stuff has been out there all season. I think a lot of teams were just waiting for the Bucks to just get to a tipping point where they're not a playoff team. They're currently sitting out of the play-in. Um, Charlotte has kind of lapped them in the play-in. Tournament seeding is kind of like being like that 11th seed, that bubble team trying to get to 10. You kind of look at their draft capital situation. They do have a swap with the New Orleans Pelicans. Um, I think it would be in their best interest to trade Giannis. And how does this kind of relate to the Detroit Pistons? Now, I think a lot of people have put out these like mock trades, these fake trade um, packages for Giannis, and we're going to be reacting to one. This was actually from our friends over at FanDuel, and this is the mock trade they came up with. So let's read it. It says, "Who says no? The Bucks would get Tobias Harris, Jaden Ivey, Ron Holland, a 2026 first, a 2028 first, and a 2030 first in exchange for Giannis to the Detroit Pistons." Who says no? I honestly think, like, looking at a mock trade like that for Giannis, here's my thought process with it. I think when you're talking about him, the type of player he is, he's in his 30s. He's a guy that I think we can all agree when he's out there on the court, he is just the best power forward in basketball. I don't really think you can really debate that. Um, I think a trade offer like that is probably what you're looking at. You're probably looking at least 3 to 4 first round picks for him. You're looking at a salary filler. That's why Tobias Harris was mentioned in that trade deal. And then you also have some young guys in Ron Holland and Jaden Ivey. This is just my assumption, in my opinion. I think the Bucks would probably ask for Ron Anasari, any type of Giannis trade, just to kind of restock the cupboard. If they are heading towards kind of like a retooling or a rebuild. But me personally, I think if I'm the Pistons, if you trade for Giannis, that just accelerates what you think your window is. And why it kind of accelerates that is when you look at his contract, he's under contract for this year in 25-26 at 54 million. Then the following season, he's at 58 million. Then he has a 62 million player option in 27-28, where he'll be 33 years old. And he's also eligible to sign for a $270 million contract extension if you do want to give it to him. And the reason why I put his contract on the screen is I kind of want to point to the injuries that this guy has had over the past couple of years. You see all the calf injuries, you see the foot injuries, the shoulder injuries, the knee injuries. Like, he's 31 years old right now, right? I think when you just kind of look at him as a player, we understand that he's an MVP. We understand that he's a champion. He would be really interesting in Detroit with a Cade Cunningham and a Jalen Duren, but like that team would get incredibly expensive because Giannis is making 50 million. Cade would be making 50 million. Jalen Duren obviously would want his contract extension. The depth that you would have on this team would be the same depth that you currently have with this roster. It would be depleted. Players would need new contracts, and it would be very difficult to keep this team together for the long term. You would probably have a very short little, 2 to 3 year window to try to compete for a championship. And kind of looking at those injuries, I think all the calf injuries to me are just a red flag of an Achilles tear waiting to happen. We've seen so many guys this past playoffs, whether it was Damian Lillard that was dealing with the calf strain, tore his Achilles. Same with Tyrese Halliburton. Anytime you see calf strain in an injury report, I always get really weary of just letting guys sit and relax. I know this Pistons player isn't on a Giannis level whatsoever, but like when Bobby Klitman last year was dealing with his calf strain, he didn't play at all for several months. I could even go back to a few years ago during the Monty Williams era, if you guys remember. Bojan Bogdanovic had a calf strain. He didn't play for several months either because calf strains are so difficult to heal. The time is just so random and it fluctuates. It really depends on the athlete and the individual. But I think for a mock trade like this, not to say that I don't think Giannis is a good player, not to say that I don't think that the Pistons wouldn't be a championship caliber team. I probably just wouldn't really be too thrilled of trading for him. I think there are other players that if the Pistons are going to give up 3 first round picks and multiple players to try to capitalize on a championship window, I honestly think that they could look for a player that isn't in his 30s and isn't just dealing with nagging injuries. And the way that he plays is such a physical brand of smash mouth basketball. I just don't want to be in a situation where you do make a trade like that and it kind of comes back to bite you in the ass and his body starts to fail and he needs all these surgeries and then like he's sitting on the bench and that's like 50-60 million dollars with the cap space that's just sitting on the bench and you might have a down year and you trade 3 first and you might not have a draft pick during those years when he is injured. But that's just my opinion on it. I think Giannis will get dealt. I just don't think it's going to be in the Central Division, one, to a Central Division rival, and two, I don't think the Detroit Pistons are really looking to, commit that much to a player that's in his 30s and has dealt with the amount of injuries that he's dealt with. And I I kind of strike Giannis is going to a team like possibly a Golden State, uh, maybe even like a Miami or a Minnesota personally, but that's just me. Maybe the Knicks. I don't know. I know there was reports that he wanted to go to New York because it's closer to Greece because he likes to travel to Greece in the off season. But just to kind of react to that mock trade, I saw a lot of people talk about it this past week. I just don't really think the Detroit Pistons are looking to be in the Giannis sweepstakes. I would probably say the chances of that are pretty slim to none. I do kind of want to get into the trade exception. Now, we've talked about the trade exception a couple of times on this podcast, and the Pistons currently have a $14 million trade exception that they can use ahead of this NBA trade deadline or this summer if they do choose to use it during the summer, but they would have to be pretty quick to use it in the summer because it does expire uh, very early in July, but trade exception. I came up with 5 players. I'm going to put a graphic that I made on the screen and go over the 5 players. So let's go over it real quick. So the 5 players that I have are Bobby Portis, Kobe White, Royce O'Neal, Max Christie, and Luke Kennard. So let's talk about Bobby Portis first and foremost with this graphic. I think Bobby Portis to me makes so much sense for the Detroit Pistons. We talked about it a couple of weeks ago. I think he fits the culture, the identity, being able to hit 3-point shots at a very good rate. He's shooting over 40% from three this year, um, and has been one of the Milwaukee Bucks' better players, especially with the Giannis trade on the horizon. It'll be interesting to see where Bobby Portis lands. Could he be rerouted to another team? Could the Detroit Pistons kind of be facilitators with their trade exception and kind of absorb his contract and he could be on the Pistons? You never know. I've always liked Bobby Portis from afar. I know there was a little scuffle there with him and Isaiah Stewart. They just don't like each other. They just like to beat each other's ass when they're facing each other. But that might change if they are teammates. They might actually like each other. They might actually like hanging out together. But could you imagine a second unit with Isaiah Stewart at center and Bobby Portis at power forward, and you also have Ron Holland and Javonte Green out there? Whew, man, that would be nasty. Second player on that list I had was Kobe White. Now, I know there were reports that the Bulls were possibly looking to deal Ao DeSumo, but it sounds like they're kind of cooling off on that idea, but they are still open to moving on from Kobe White, who's on the last year of a deal. I think the Bulls' asking price was a first round pick. Don't really know if the Pistons would fork over a first round pick for Kobe White, but hey, you never know. Right now, he's averaging 19 points a game for the Chicago Bulls. He could be that secondary scorer that you're looking for, whether it's off the bench or in closing lineups next to Cade Cunningham. I think Kobe White does make a whole lot of sense. He can put the ball on the floor, he can facilitate and score. He's a league average 3-point shooter, around 36, 35%. I've always really liked his game from afar, being a Tar Heel. As you guys know, I'm a very big North Carolina fan, but maybe it's just a little bit of bias of me wanting Kobe White. I do think he does make sense for the Detroit Pistons. I've also kind of seen him linked to Minnesota because they are looking for more guard help in that, right? Now, a player that I had number 3, we actually just saw recently when we played the Phoenix Suns, Royce O'Neal. I've always liked him when he was in Utah. 3-and-D wing, plays the forward position, shooting over 40% from three with the Phoenix Suns. I think he also fits the culture with the Detroit Pistons. His tough-minded defensively, could back up Tobias Harris. He would be another good option for the Detroit Pistons if they're looking for a guy that can knock down 3-point shots, defend, grab rebounds, dive for loose balls. I think Royce O'Neal makes a whole lot of sense. It just really depends if Phoenix is really willing to move on from Royce O'Neal. This is the season they're having right now. I think they just got their 30th win of the season. They just beat the Cavs and the Pistons in back-to-back games, so they're doing really well with Dylan Brooks and Devin Booker and all those guys. They're going to be a very tough first-round matchup in the Western Conference, but don't really know if Phoenix is willing to move on from Royce O'Neal, but hey, you never really know as we do get closer to the trading deadline. Number 4 is more of a wish list for me. Max Christie from Dallas, former Michigan State Spartan. He's just having such a great season. Very young, 22, 23 years old, I believe. He's shooting over 40% from three as well, showing the ability to put the ball on the floor, defend. I don't know what Dallas is going to do in terms of like roster construction and team building. Right now, they got Anthony Davis. I mean, there's rumors floating around that Rich Paul is trying to get him traded by February 5th. They want him out of Dallas. Just hasn't really worked out for AD and the Mavs. And you have Kyrie Irving. I don't even know if he's going to come back this year. Mavs probably don't want him to come back this year. They probably want to take advantage of not being that good, and they don't really have a lot of draft picks in the long-term future. This is the last year of them actually having a draft pick. So could they possibly sneak back up in the lottery and get another young asset to pair next to Cooper Flag? Is Max Christie really a part of their long-term plans? I'm not entirely sure, you guys. I don't know. I would really like him. I think it would be an investment by the Pistons because if you look at his career, he has gotten better each and every year. it would not surprise me going into next season if this guy is close to 20 points per game. It just wouldn't surprise me. I think right now he's around 12 to 13 points a game in Dallas. I've always liked him from afar. It's more of a wish list thing for me personally, but hey, you never know. You never know. Last but not least, number 5 on that list, Luke Kennard. Now, again, I get defensively, Luke Kennard is a traffic cone. But in the limited minutes that he is playing with the Atlanta Hawks right now, he is just a flamethrower from the field. 50, 40, 90 season right now. Not too many guys in the NBA have done that. Obviously, he's not shooting that many threes. I think he's shooting like around 3 attempts a game, but he's shooting over 40% from 3. He's a guy that I think can definitely come off of your bench, can play make a little bit. The only reason why he went to Atlanta was because Trae Young recruited them there, and Trae Young is in Washington now. So Atlanta may look to move off of a Luke Kennard. They're kind of just a team right now that is going through the motions. They have games where they look like they might not even make a play-in tournament, but there are other games where they take care of business and beat teams. They're very up and down, not consistent. But I mean, if you're looking to upgrade three-point shooting, I think there are a lot of guys on this list, from Bobby Portis to Kobe White to Luke Kennard to Royce O'Neal to Max Christie. I do think that the Detroit Pistons will use this trade exception to try to improve their shooting. We saw last night how crucial it is to hit threes. We hit 10 threes. Duncan Robinson was responsible for 5 of those. Imagine if you're hitting a good 12 to 15 threes a night with Duncan Robinson and another player that is a good perimeter shooter. That's what I expect the Pistons to do with their trade exception. Look to see what's out there. Look to see if there are other teams that need help facilitating a trade, and you can absorb that $14 million of trade exception to try to add another 3-point specialist or a playmaker, maybe both. You never know. I mean, another player that I really like that isn't really in the trade exception range is Malik Monk. I've told you guys before. Sacramento has been playing him much more. And I saw a report this morning, which I really hope this doesn't happen, that the Cleveland Cavaliers are talking to the Kings about sending DeAndre Hunter. And there's like packages around like Dennis Schroeder, Keon Ellis, and a Malik Monk. Like Dennis Schroeder to the Cavs would fix all their problems with a backup guard, because obviously Ty Jerome was just killer for them last year. He hasn't really played too much. I don't even think he's played at all for the Memphis Grizzlies. The Lonzo Ball experience has just been a epic failure for them, but it'll be interesting to see what does happen at the deadline in terms of the Detroit Pistons trade exception and what they plan to do in terms of upgrading the roster. Like, are they going to make a big swing for a Michael Porter Jr. or Miles Bridges? Are they just going to use their trade exception to upgrade the roster for more three-point shooting or playmaking or more size in the front court? This upcoming week, I should say, is going to be very, very interesting. I'm going to end the podcast, you guys, kind of forecasting next week's game. So let's go over the games. So the Pistons will have a couple of days off after they play the Brooklyn Nets, and they're going to see the Denver Nuggets. And guess who's back, you guys? Nikola Jokic. Nikola Jokic came back from injury against the Clippers. So the Pistons are going to see Jamal Murray and Nikola Jokic at Little Caesars Arena on the 3rd at 7 o'clock. They get a day off where they'll get to host the Washington Wizards on trading deadline day on the 5th. That is a home game as well at 7 o'clock. And then they have a back-to-back on the 5th and 6th. So they play the New York Knicks to end the week at 7:30 at home. That is going to be a nationally televised game, you guys. That will be an Amazon Prime game with the Pistons playing the Knicks at home at Little Caesars Arena. I already know that game is going to be loud. That game is going to be sold out. The last time we played the Knicks, that felt like a playoff atmosphere. They beat them by 30. Jaden Ivey and Isaiah Stewart were phenomenal in that game when we played the Knicks last month in January, but get to see him again this week to end the week. They only played 3 times this week. Obviously, playing 4 times this past week was a lot, especially having a West Coast trip and then having to come and play tomorrow against the Brooklyn Nets. Would have thought the NBA would have given him a little bit of a break, but hey, 82 game season, long NBA season. I'm going to wrap this podcast up. I've been talking for about 50 minutes. We kept it under an hour like I wanted to do so, but lots of just unpack. Obviously, with JB Bickerstaff's comments about going for it when the opportunity is there, the Mark Stein report about the Detroit Pistons being internally interested in Michael Porter Jr. and Miles Bridges. Let me know what you guys think of those trade reports and those trade rumors, the rising stars with Ron Holland not getting invited, Danish Jenkins, and the contract situation of just looking to sign a contract for this year and talking to Trajan and the Pistons this summer of getting him a bigger deal. The mock trade with Giannis, which I don't think the Pistons are going to trade for Giannis. And the trade exceptions, my top 5 list for trade exceptions. Leave it down in the comment section if you're watching live on YouTube right now, or if you're an audio listener. What do you think about the trading deadline and what the Pistons should possibly do? Hope you guys are having a great rest of your Saturday. We'll see you guys tomorrow for our post-game podcast as the Pistons face the Brooklyn Nets at home tomorrow. Should be a good game. Be interesting to see if Michael Porter Jr. is actually healthy. If he's sitting on the bench, man, I don't even want to see my timeline. So many people are going to speculate, especially with that Mark Stein report that did come out today. But again, hope you guys are staying safe, staying warm, and as always, go Pistons. Peace.